So the mission's kind of shaped like a Y, at least at the moment. It's St. Louis is right in the center. And if you don't know, St. Louis is right on the border between Missouri and Illinois, right on the Mississippi River. And in that mission, you can drive west for 4 hours, out to the middle of Missouri, all the way to Columbia and Jefferson City, Missouri. Or you can go east all the way to the border with Indiana, the Champaign zone. Or you can go south all the way to Arkansas, to that border. So it's pretty big. I remember one of my areas I got transferred, and I had to drive 3.5 hours up to St. Louis, and then 3.5 hours east to my next area in Champaign. So it's a pretty big mission, and 8 stakes, and each stake is a zone with, might have changed by now, but a couple districts per zone. When I was there, we started with about 180 missionaries, and we ended up at about 240 missionaries by the time I finished. So it's a pretty big mission. Not a lot of church sites. We laugh because the Independence Mission, they have, they're over in Kansas City area, and they have lots. They have all these jails and things like that, and then Des Moines, Iowa Mission has Nauvoo and Carthage in it, but we don't have much. I lived about 2 hours from Nauvoo, and I never got to go. But you'd be surprised how much church history there is that people don't know about. We had this one, I guess you'd call him an investigator. He's never been baptized, but he's an expert on Mormon history in the state. And he took us on a tour of St. Louis saying, this is where President Brigham Young taught a sermon in this cathedral. And over here is the place of the first Mormon church established in St. Louis. I remember the coolest part I ever had was I was reading in the history of the church, I think, and was talking about the saints coming from Decatur, Illinois, through Springfield, Illinois, on their way west. And I looked at the map they showed, and then I looked at the map of where we lived, and looked back, and I was like, wait a minute. We live on the route the saints took. We literally live on the road between those two towns, and as far as I know, it's a straight shot. It's the same road. So I lived a couple hundred yards off the road where the saints traveled down. So it's a cool thing to think about. Even though there's not a lot of big church sites that a lot of tourists go to, the saints lived there. There's a lot of history about St. Louis being kind to the saints, especially when they were kicked out of other places like Clay County. The people of St. Louis reached out to the saints a lot. There's quite a lot of churches. It depends on what area you're in, but I'd say it's a very religious area. When I was in the South, there was a lot of Southern Baptist people and General Baptists and just a lot of Baptists. A lot more Methodists and Catholics in St. Louis, especially a lot of Catholics, and quite a few Jewish people as well. Really nice people. Not always super willing to talk about religion, but I've met a lot of wonderful Christian people at food drives and service projects we helped out with who were generally pretty open to the missionaries and the thing we did. Even if they didn't agree with what we were teaching, they generally appreciated the effort we put in to what we taught. And that was pretty cool. I met a lot of wonderful people that weren't part of our church that we got to know. I think the key is being real with them. A lot of people can sense if the difference between someone who cares and wants to be their friend and a real friend is going to bring them to the gospel versus someone who's there to get a lesson or to get that one extra new investigator or who's doing it just because that's what they're supposed to do. I found the key of people really progressing is people you loved, people that you'd set aside the differences you had with them. Maybe they have a different way of living or a different way of looking at the world, but really getting to the fact that they're a child of God and you want what's best for them. If you show them that and you love them for who they are, then they'll actually care about what you have to say. So I served from January 2nd, 2013 to December 29th, 2014. So the entire year of 2013 and 2014 I was there. So I started with President Clark and I finished with President Morgan. And I started off in Maryland Heights. It's a pretty solid ward in the middle of St. Louis, just kind of northwest side of St. Louis. And then after that, I got transferred to Poplar Bluff, Missouri. That was my second area, which is a town about 14,000 people, right in southern Missouri near the Boot Heel, and just kind of by the Arkansas border. Big area, very, as I said, very Southern Baptist, very, very religious down there. Lots of ticks. We did service for a lady in the Ozarks, and it was my first experience with ticks, and I had a couple dozen of them. So bring bug spray. You'll need it. Long pants too. After that, I went to Champaign, Illinois, which I loved. It was the Mahomet ward. So it's the west side of Champaign in the small town of Mahomet. Also a very solid ward. It's a college town, so you have some younger couples that have kind of moved away from Utah to pursue an education at the University of Illinois. I love that ward. I love the people in it. After that, I went to Centralia, Illinois, which is a tiny town of 10,000 people. But as far as I know, it's the biggest area, or the second biggest. It would take us, I think, hour and a half, 2 hours to drive from the south side to the north side of the area. We kind of stayed in town because, a town to 400 people, it's kind of hard to travel there just to teach. And so, but I love that area. I was only there one transfer because I actually got switched into a Spanish area. So we ran out of Spanish missionaries, do some weird workout with Salt Lake and their scheduling. So I ended up getting my mission language switched. So I served in the Spanish branch, which was the entire city of St. Louis. So we covered 3 states, plus we'd sometimes get called to go other places in the mission to teach someone. I love that. That's a small branch. I think when we were there, we had, our biggest day was, I think, 22 people at church. We were ecstatic. We're like, this is the best. We love it. We got investigators here. We have some less actives. It was awesome. I love that branch. Great people, even though it's pretty small, because we spent our entire time just looking for people who speak Spanish and teaching them. And then my final area was Springfield, Illinois, which was great too. I'm actually hoping to visit this fall, and I'm looking forward to visiting people there. I've got some really good friends I'm going to stay with and catch up with.